Welcome back, everybody. This is John Malanka with United Patients Group. Be informed and be well. And today's special guest is Andrew McIntyre. He's a 50-year-old survivor of childhood seizure disorder, born in the 1970s with severe allergies. Actually born in 1970 with severe allergies. Those allergies later surfaced as a seizure disorder, primarily during deep sleep, that essentially interrupted immunity and then cognitive function and developmental delay. He was one of the first pediatric patients in the world to take part in the Anti Epileptic Drug AED trial of Depakote in 1976 at Tufts Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. This is an interesting tidbit here. In 1979, he discovered that using non-psychoactive raw edible forms of cannabis with his diet decreased his severe headaches and ADHD symptoms during the day and his seizures at night. This experience compelled him to study the plant's medicinal properties, and several years later, as a teenager, he also discovered this and went into deeper as to wondering why and how this is working. And so welcome, Andrew. I'm excited to have you on because we have some mutual friends that have been talking about Andrew McIntyre. You have to get him on the show for years. And so finally, this is the first. You and I have had numerous phone calls, but not video calls. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here. Thank you.
So you've had a heck of a life, and you and I have again talked off camera and via phone. But you're a health advocate like myself. You're a genetic specialist. You're a certified caregiver, scientist, a biologist, and so you've done quite a bit in this industry. But you've experienced a lot in health, your own personal health, but in science. And the thing about the raw thing is 1979, because a lot of people didn't understand the difference between the cannabinoids. And I don't think cannabinoids were even discovered then. But 1979, discovering raw, I had Dr. Frankel on the show one day, and we were talking about raw cannabis and how the cavemen were interested into raw cannabis because fire wasn't discovered until 2 million years ago. And so they were all already going with the raw. So you're way ahead of the game as well with us here. So can you share a little about what you've been doing? I know you have.
Well, let me just comment on that. So in 1979, I grew the plant by accident. I thought it was birdseed, and we planted it around my family's grave sites and in front of the post office. And then we almost got in trouble, but we, because the plants came up, and of course they didn't have any. They weren't like a regular flower or anything like that. So it was very accidental in the beginning, and I ate the plant raw, and I didn't know what THCA was or CBDA, or that the seeds came from from Jamaica, and they were actually like almost certified sacramental seeds with varying amounts of CBD and THC in them. So they weren't your classic high strains. They were very flavorful and like landrace type of genetics that I first started with. And at the time, I didn't know the difference between THC or even what THC was, or any of the cannabinoids. I just ate it raw, and about 3 years later, I got a couple friends gave me a book about Bob Marley, and that's where my faith walk started with cannabis, because they were saying that the children in Jamaica, they eat it raw and they use it in tea just like I did, because I thought it was like basil, or my dad was a tea salesman. Gotcha. So it was really accidental, and then I didn't learn about THCA until maybe like 1984 or 85, when I started reading some really advanced books, botanical books from 1950, which was strange. It was interesting because I learned to read very late, and then I was reading really difficult literature, and the plant really helped out with that, and the diet really helped, of course. And I had amazing coaches and teachers and parents and siblings. But the plant just took the edge off of those really bad migraine headaches that the drugs couldn't touch. The and then the Depakote and the other drugs that they put on, I have a really sensitive liver. So that's why I was one of the first persons to fail out of the Depakote trial study. And that potentially saved my life, because it was a very controversial study. Most of the children passed away during it or after it. But at that time, a child with epilepsy really had 6 to 12 months to live, because there's no AEDs. Depakote was the first one that came out. So it was like a death sentence to get that diagnosis.
Isn't it amazing how you kind of stumbled on this plant? I mean, I always look back and have these fireside conversations where you're sitting there. It's like, how did early man or woman go out and say, "Hey, this is an artichoke. Let's peel the leaves, because if we don't, we're going to be poking our it hurts to eat because of the little thorns that are on there. If you keep on peeling and get to the center, there's the heart there, and that's the best part." Same thing with don't eat the stinging nettle thing, because it'll sting you, but you can cook it with tea. I mean, who was the first person to come out? And the same thing with you, how you accidentally stumbled across this, thinking that it was. So you were pulling it apart, and I know you said your dad was into teas, but were you adding it into your salad, or were you throwing it into your tea, as you mentioned?
I first I actually thought it was my auntie's basil, and because I took the seeds from her, and I didn't realize that I shouldn't have taken them. But then, because I just thought it was like it was a huge bucket of seeds. It looked like bird seed, like something you'd grab the coffee bucket and just go throw them out to the birds, And
but it was cannabis seeds?
They were cannabis seeds, and then when they grew, they looked, it looked like basil or rosemary or sage. It looked like, so I tasted it, and I think when you talk about that prehistoric man, one of the things about the plant when I was younger, when I smelled it, it immediately sort of, I was like, wow, what is this? But I just smelled, and I was eating the raw leaves. I wasn't really even making good buds at this point. These are just leafy plants that had that vegetative feel to them, and it's like a marjoram or just a regular herb. And but then when I started to eat more and more of it, because it sort of just even just a little bit of it, the flavor would just reduce the anxiety and the attention deficit, and I could think clearer. And then the more that I ate it, then these headaches that I used to have they would give me Fioricet, if you know what that is. It's like a narcotic.
I don't know that.
And I was like a kid taking these Fioricet pills, and they were like, as I grew older and I had a beer and stuff like that, it was very similar to having two beers. Like I would be in school and I'd have a buzz on, and it wouldn't help the pain. I'd just be buzzed, so I wouldn't care as much. But I couldn't really be effective doing my homework, and But with eating the raw cannabis and getting to bed early, then I could concentrate. My behavior at school was better. And
how long did it take you to pinpoint that was the plant that you're eating that was doing it? Because I mean, you must have been eating other things throughout the day, and wondering, were you able to kind of fine tune where that relief was coming from?
It was pretty immediate, within, because the plant has to take off and then get potent and strong. So it was in that first summer. I'd say that the second and third summer, when I started to look back on it, and then I started to actually make plans about then I figured out it was illegal, and I had to hide my 4 little plants or the 3 little plants. At the time, I incorrectly thought that it was legal under the Constitution to have 3 hemp plants. I think it's in the Constitution, but
Huh.
I didn't understand law that there's other statutes that eliminate those rights now
Yeah.
that are unconstitutional, but they're still law. So but that's all I needed was 3 plants to make about a quarter pound, and that's how small a medicine a pediatric needs for the
Wow.
year.
And you work with you've taken your life experience and you do work with pediatrics. I know that. Can we back up on how, because you shared with me one time on one of our calls that it was a MMR vaccine that started you on this journey. Is that right?
Well, I had colic and I had problems from childbirth into the second year. I breastfed longer than other children. And I had a lot of allergies, and the pediatrician chose to give me the MMR, but I wasn't strong enough yet. And so I was one of those quote unquote, vaccine injuries. But it's hard for me to even say that because I don't want to be included in an anti-vaxxer crowd.
Yeah.
And I also don't want to be included in a forced vaccine crowd. But what happened to me, I need to share because vaccines are not 100% safe, and there are people getting injured. But I'm not a part of the group that thinks there's a conspiracy theory or thinks that all vaccines are bad. But I don't believe in forced vaccination. So it basically the way I understand it scientifically now is, like the CDC says on their website, that it should be the choice of the pediatrician, and the pediatrician has a blood test for white blood counts and RBCs and different PPOs, or there's a lot of things that they can look at your immune system, and if you're not stable, then the CDC recommends to delay them, which is interesting. It's completely different than what the legislation they're trying to force down. It goes against the CDC and it goes against the doctor's recommendation, and so that's another whole issue. I just want to make sure that I'm not in the.
Yeah, I know. Nowadays you have to be very sensitive on everything you talk about and which side you stand on, and I have friends that they vaccinated half their children and the other half didn't, and 2 of their children something happened, so they didn't do the others, and then everybody wants, like, perfect example with the COVID virus. I have friends in the East Coast where they have a niece that they have a niece that they've never met, and the parents won't bring them over because they know that their children aren't vaccinated. So it's a tough topic to get into. Let's talk about why the cannabis plant worked for you, and can you talk about cannabinoids? But most important, let's start with the endocannabinoid system, because we're gonna have a lot of our listeners on here who may have children going through this or themselves, and they're saying, okay, first off, why did this work for you, Andrew? I'm experiencing this, and then how can I get involved or learn? And so I want you to share, your knowledge about of cannabis, because you've been doing this for how long now? 40 years?
Well, I've had my caregiver's license and my legal license status for 8 years, and then before that, I was just a little, I just had these little tiny things that, if I ever got caught, it would have been a nuisance. And but I was studying for, since I was 9 years old
I'm guessing you're my age, about 50 something, so plus or minus. After I was throwing at the 40 years. But can you talk about the endocannabinoid system and what it is and why it's so important?
So the endocannabinoid system, there's a 2 receptor system, and all the studies that are out there, it shows that it's a regulator of metabolism. And so most epilepsy and autism children have a metabolic dysfunction. And then as a geneticist, being involved in the Human Genome Project and in fish genes and in the genes of cannabis, many of the children have gene deletions or gene dysfunctions that have metabolic consequences. Like, one of the big ones is the methylation genes where they can't metabolize B vitamins, or so they have to have a different kind of a folate. And what is interesting about cannabis, it helps, especially the raw acidic forms. It helps with a ketogenic diet to maintain the fat metabolism. And in fat metabolism, there's cell recovery, and oxidative stress is reduced. And so for most children with epilepsy and autism, there's a constant metabolic disruption. A lot of us, including me, have like gut dysfunctions or food allergies that then cause, inflammation markers that then affect, other elements, and it finally gets to your brain. And then that's when, there's too much energy or not enough energy, however way you want to argue it. And, the neurons, they don't communicate the same way. You get that seizure, it's like that jerk or the convulsions, and it's basically the signaling system is broken down.
Do you still experience that today?
As what?
As an adult, do you still experience that today?
Yes, I do. Yeah, especially if I'm dehydrated, if I don't have enough salt, if I get if I'm too stressed out, I don't if I don't treat myself right. That can happen. As an advocate, you're caring for a lot of people, and there's deaths, or you have to go to the hospital, and you're conflicted about, should I take care of myself, or do I take care of this patient? Well, they're going to die. They could die. So a lot of times I put myself second, and I've had actually more adult seizures in the last 8 years than I have in the last 30, because this new career, this new position that I'm holding is so much different than my old structured life. Was very safe. Was very I had a lot of friends, but I wasn't so public.
Yeah.
And I didn't deal with controversial issues like, people wanting me to talk about vaccine injuries and safety and.
Sorry, my fault.
Politics. Well, no, you didn't. I don't mean you. I mean, when they had the legislation, and I couldn't become a part of it. It was too close to me, John. It's tough. When you go through something like that, and you try to, I couldn't testify. It was too close. I could testify on pediatric cannabis. It seemed like it was more rational and less toxic, and the momentum was going in our direction. So it was because we were like winning on legalizing medical use of cannabis around the country. We had the studies out of Israel and Poland, Czechoslovakia. The ICRS was forming. But with the vaccine issue, it seems like we're losing ground, and they're going to take away patients' rights and parents' and doctors' rights to maintain the Hippocratic oath, whatever there, that we will do no harm.
With you in Maine, I know it's a recreational legal state, and I've heard that they've really wiped out all the qualifying conditions, and so now is it just more a free-for-all there? And cannabis is not a one-size-fits-all type of medicine. And I call it a medicine because I've seen it work and I've seen it not work. And I want our listeners to realize, I always say, it's not the golden pill, the golden ticket, take this and you'll be healed. I've seen it work, I've seen it not work, and I'm certain it's the same with you. And sometimes what works for me, and you and I being the same age and to say the same ailment, we might have a different sweet spot. Do you talk formulations, or do you talk formulation strains? So, I don't talk strains because I can grow something here same seed, you grow it there and it comes out completely different. You know, and especially in dispensaries across the nation, you know, you walk in there and I've seen, you know, it's like, that's not, you know, Andrew Starr type of thing, you know. I've seen Andrew's, you know, type of product, and so they have a lot of these names for marketing purposes. And what are you seeing out there in Maine? One, but you know, you working with patients and families, are you seeing more children? Are you spending a lot more time with families and children? Or are you spending more time with adults, or the whole gamut to help because you are a health advocate?
I'm seeing more of the whole gamut now. When I first started, it was probably like 60 to 80% pediatrics, and my advocacy was 95% pediatrics. So when I did the advocacy, I would just consult with patients all over the world and families. They would call me for advice about what's going on in my dispensary. Like, I've got this guy down the street that's growing some plants. Like, how can I do this at home? And I did that for free because there was no other way legally. I couldn't ship legally and then maintain my license. So I was only allowed in the beginning to treat children in Maine. So I took on about 10 patients the first 10 that I could work with. But no patient there's no smoking gun. After all the work I've done, if you come to me with Dravet or Lennox-Gastaut or myoclonic jerk, so whatever your seizure type is or where you are in the spectrum, that still doesn't translate to a certain amount of CBD or THC in milligram dose. There's just a general guideline that CBD seems to be less intrusive. I don't want to say it's safer because some people don't like that, but usually there's less interaction with CBD. You can, and many of the kids, 40% of the kids with Lennox-Gastaut and Dravet have a substantial health outcome, increase in health outcome, and those were profound results. Those are from the GW Pharmaceutical FDA trial study, and that was confirmed with Tikkun Olam and with Entourage from this guy named Sergio in Bolivia, and also with Charlotte's Web with with Charlie Figge, Paige Figge, and the Stanley brothers. What's really interesting is that the whole plant, Israel and the three other whole plant studies had 40% increase in health benefits, and very much like GW, but all of them had the same kind of between 1 milligram per pound to 5 milligram per pound, but a smaller dose. The GW dose is like 10 mg per pound, 20 mg per pound. But
when you say GW, are you talking Epidiolex right now, or are you talking?
Yes. So it's very interesting that you can get similar results from an isolate at a higher dose.
Yeah.
And but what I've seen though is that there'll be a bucket of kids that'll fall into the isolate category, and they'll have success. And then there's whether or not you get your product from me on the hemp side or the Stanley brothers or some of these great guys like Jason Cranford's another one, or Sergio in Bolivia. Depending on what plant that you're making the whole plant from, sometimes one child will do better on Charlotte's Web, or they'll do better on Hope Springs, or they'll do better with Jason Cranford's different speech, different strain origins.
Do you see, I mean, this is a perfect example that's not a one size fits all. Because it works on one child doesn't mean that it works on other. I'm very familiar with those companies and their products. We work with a lot of families, children, adults that have had success with one, not on the other. Or another child, has the same ailment as one. One child having success on this and they're not. And then they try another product and it does work. And so do you ever see, hopefully it gets to that point, because, you know, we get this question all the time, is since it's not a one size fits all, do you see it changing? And that would be wonderful. You have, you know, cancer, take this. You have diabetes, take that. You have autism or seizures, take this. Do you see it going that way? And or are there any ailments that you're seeing a success with that same formulation each and every time, like Sativex with MS, with a 2.75 milligram CBD, 2.75 milligram of THC, and people just replicated that. You know, they say, great, it's not available in our country, and we don't, and insurance is not covering it. We're just going to go get a 1-to-1 ratio. And so, just like the buzzword with CBD was in the past 8 years. Remember last year or the year before, everyone said, oh, 1-to-1 ratio. I think it made it out into an article and everyone says 1-to-1, 1-to-1, 1-to-1. So are you seeing it going that way, where you are seeing formulations that are working on a higher success rate, you know, 70 to 80% of the time with a child or an adult with those ailments?
I think in a general, from where we were 8 years ago when I started in working with Dr. Dustin Sulak, and then being aligned with what Bonnie Goldstein does and the way she uses acidic groups, and with geriatrics, I definitely agree that we're getting better. So if somebody has like MS and Parkinson's, that we know a direction, but the actual specific dose, like per pound or what strain, how much acidic groups, it has to be tweaked and customized. The only thing that I've seen that is pretty much a slam dunk is with like irritable bowel syndrome, and where they definitely need, you know, 4 to 8 times more CBD than THC. And I think it's well documented now that, you know, if they take a hemp capsule, they'll get a certain amount of release, but then when they take a real medical capsule that has some THCA and just, you know, a little bit more THC, not just slightly off the federal registry for hemp, so it's not anywhere near, not even close to a 1-to-1, and that, you know, and those nuances really make the difference. I really love Bonnie Goldstein's work because she really did a good job, you know, after Dustin came on the scene with the THCA, when that kind of started here in New England. I think it got out into the ICRS, but there were, you know, there's families like Jaden's family, but he created Jaden's Juice. He was from California. That was in like, what, 99 or 2000. Jason Cranford did some THCA work. You know, there were other advocates besides myself. I was just lucky to have one of my mentors is Dr. Sulak.
He's a great guy. I've known him for years. He's spoken at our conferences, and both he and Bonnie have spoken at our conferences. But they dear friends, but also on our advisory board. So I'm also a big fan of both of those doctors. I think they're one of the tops, if not the top, in the industry. Because a lot of doctors still, unfortunately, even here in California, you know, don't know about dosing and formulations. And you still hear doctors, you know, I talk to patients and they'll say, I just got back from, you know, a doctor and he says, take indica night, sativa day. And it's just like, God, it's more than just indica night, sativa day. And you mentioned earlier about adding a little more THC, that it's not, you know, because patients still, the stigma is still there. It's starting to drop. It's from when Corinne and I jumped in this industry in 2011 because of, you know, we were forced in this. I shouldn't say forced. You know, my father-in-law, her father was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, metastasized to his brain. And all we thought, we came across a study that showed 40% of cancer patients pass a malnutrition before cancer takes over the body, so wasting syndrome. And so when we went to the oncologist's office, I said, I mean, we try, you know, how much time do we have? Weeks May we try cannabis for appetite stimulation? The doctor said, go for it. I know nothing about it. Our outcome, he's still alive today, 2020. So in his formulation was a mixture of raw and heated, and raw for our listeners is THCA and CBDA. It's like having in the 70s and 80s when wheatgrass was popular, still today, where you cut down the wheatgrass and then juice it. You can do the same thing with a cannabis plant. It's non-psychoactive, great for inflammation. You were sharing that earlier. And so he was using about 3 milligrams a day. That's it. And within days, he was eating again. That was our purpose. Okay, he'll pass peacefully. Complexion came back. Day 8, he was on full-time oxygen. Day 8, he was off his oxygen, shuffling around the house. 6 months, hospice fires him as a patient. And at 9 months, he was never going to get scanned. We incorporated the 6-month mark, some heavier oil, but 4-to-1 ratio, still about 20, 25 milligrams at night. And his first scans came back with no evidence of recurrent disease. And he's had about 20 plus scans, and they've all come back, knock on wood, no evidence of recurrent disease. If he was on a CBD is wonderful. And I want to, you're a whole plant expert as well. And let's talk about the entourage effect, why they're all needed. If he was on a straight CBD ratio, I know for a fact he would not be here today. And so a lot of patients call us and say, I want the medical portion, not the recreational portion. So can you share how important THC is in healing, and even not enough to be high? And the goal is not to be high. The goal is to become healed, healthy. And the same thing with the epileptic children. You'll see great CBDs working on 15 to 25% of the kids. You add a little minute amount of THC, and that number can go up to 75% success rate. And so can you talk about the importance of the entourage effect and what the entourage effect is, and you being a whole plant expert, talking about that as well, please?
Yeah, you touched base on some really important things. So like in cancer, a lot of people come to me and they say, well, Andy, you're so smart, you know everything, and everybody talks about you. Don't you have the cure to cancer? And I tell them, first of all, I don't believe in cancer in that sense but I know I don't have the cure. The cure is inside yourself. I said, I can help you and with your symptoms but you're going to need a team to cure cancer. You need spirit, you need a dietitian, and then in some cases you need a surgeon to cut stuff out. And sometimes, like with multiple myeloma, right now they need to have those cocktails of because we don't have it figured out. But I would say that for the viewers, the most important thing that I've seen in cannabis therapy is the inclusion of like 3 milligrams of an acidic group for this wasting, because like you said, cancer is primarily a metabolic problem. The cells are not dying on time, and they forgot about that gene that says, it's time to recover. And they need to have fat metabolism, and they need to not have fat metabolism that's regulated, meaning not like a ketogenic, but there needs to be times in the day where they have carbohydrates, and their adenosine triphosphate and their energy cycles are replenished, but primarily stuck in fat metabolism, especially when they're sleeping. So like those 3 milligram doses that are really effective, Dr. Bonnie Goldstein's done some work, Dr. Sulak, there's so many other people now. It's been now 4 years with geriatrics, where these small doses, especially with acidic group inclusion, with like 3 milligrams of THCA and like 1 milligram of THC and 2 milligrams of CBD, and these little tiny doses have these metabolic constraints. And I just want the viewers to know when I speak about my opinions, I don't want to come off sounding like a know-it-all, but they're just my opinions of what I've seen clinically. The only explanation I can make about why THC is so potent at these low doses medically, where you're not even close to being high, and yet you'll see the ketogenic like strips. These are test strips that children use to show how much fat metabolism there is, how much ketonolysis, and to see those strips go up 2 points with 1 milligram for a 20-pound baby, or like 5 milligrams for a 150-pound or 50-pound. You know, in these really small doses, the keto strips jump. The only way I can explain it is the terpenes must be affecting the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is then regulating glucocorticoids. And again, we get back to what's the medical component in cannabis? And it's these terpenes, these bioflavones, the things that really aren't in debate on the legislation, and they're totally harmless. It's like eating raw green tea, or a ton of kale every day, because there's vitamin K2 in the plant, which is often overlooked. That all these wonderful leaves that are trimmed off in these grow operations, there's just piles of vitamin K2 that's 4 or 5 times the value of of kale. But yeah, it is true that the acidic groups, I hope that's kind of like the one thing that I brought to the table. But I do want to say, like, there's other advocates like David Mapes and the Slater Center in Rhode Island with John Gaetanis, and the first CBDA study in the world. Was so lucky to be in New England with the Slater Center, the Hasbro's Children's Center in Rhode Island, and Boston's Children's Center, Tufts University, and to be in connection with these teams of doctors that could really help me understand and more about all the different drug choices and about the diagnostics, and help the kids. There was a few more points you want me to.
Yeah, but like the importance of the entourage effect, and I think even Ethan Russo, who's another top doctor in this industry, talks about the importance of the entourage effect, and as well as Dustin and Bonnie. I mean, can you talk about the importance of the combination of, it's like baking a cake and leaving out the flour or the egg. Yeah, and I think right. Dr. Russo even talks about it's like having the orchestra and leaving out the guy with the cymbals or the drums or the horn section. That's missing. And can you talk about what the entourage effect is, and why it's so important for us humans with the endocannabinoid system? All mammals with a vertebrae have an endocannabinoid system. And so for our listeners, ask your doctor if they know what an endocannabinoid system is. Did you know you have it? We all have it. You were earlier when you were thinking it was bird seeds, and you were talking about the Jamaicans. I want to get into spirit and religion with you, in with the plants. And I know that's another, we can go on another hour on this here too.
Let me cover that entourage question.
Go to the entourage effect, and before I forget too, I want to talk about actually, for everyone listening, the painting behind Andrew is he's an expert in painting, and so his house is filled with paintings. So this is a beautiful. I'm not going to let you get away with that, because I'm really impressed. I used to paint, but not like you. So he did show me some of these paintings. So if you look over his shoulder, that's one of his paintings, and maybe if he's brave, he'll show a couple of other ones that are over his couch. But before I forget, because this is how my 52-year-old, almost 53-year-old mind is, entourage effect. And then earlier you're talking about DNA. And so I want to ask you about the DNA. Are you into these new DNA tests that, we send in our bloods or our DNA tests to see what cannabinoids work best for you? But entourage effect, if you can take that away, please.
So I'm not sure where everybody is out there that's listening, but so if you don't know that the endocannabinoid system as the CB1 and a CB2 receptor, more simply a THC dominant and a CBD dominant receptor. So that's why it's so important to have various ratios in a formulation. So patients need to have like a high CBD formula and then a high THC formula, THCA, and be able to blend these constituents with their doctor, clinically, so they can. So how do I explain this? Every human body is different. We have different DNA. We have different environmental stresses. Some of us get the vaccines at the right time. Some of them get it at the wrong time. Some people get the wrong foods. There's different interruptions. That the basic equation is that everybody has a different number of THC receptors and a different number of CBD receptors. We also have many metabolic dysfunctions that are unique to ourselves, and some of our metabolic dysfunctions are very similar to the rest of the population. So for instance, if you eat a lot of sugar, almost everybody in the population has a metabolic dysfunction if you eat sugar. So that's an example of. But when we get to the gene deletions, like where some people can't they can't metabolize or break down or absorb B vitamins, or they can't make the right amount of dopamine or norepinephrine. That can be from a gene deletion, and that can be from a gut disorder. And then that's where somebody can come in and they're diagnosed with Lyme, but they actually have some irritable bowel syndrome, and they might have some gene deletions that make them more susceptible to Parkinson's and MS. And so each patient is not just that one diagnosis, but there's a whole host of factors. So when you look at the whole plant, it's really interesting because like the basic thing that, like you said, is indica and sativa, but the people that are watching know the plant, know that there's hybrids of indica and sativa and ruderalis. And these are the three like genomes of the plant's genetics. And so you can have an indica that has a lot of limonene in it, and like you might not want to have that at before bed, or it has a lot of myrcene, so it might if it's myrcene dominant and limonene dominant, well, it might keep you awake even though it's an indica.
And what Andrew's talking about, myrcene and limonene, these are terpenes, and I know you talked about terpenes, and a lot of our listeners may be brand new. So a terpene is like a lot of these companies now with essential oil. I'm a big fan because it reminds me of my grandmother, is stop and smell the roses. The smell that the roses put off, that's a terpene. The smell that a lemon puts off and lime puts off and a mango puts off, as well as lavender for helping with calming and sleep. So didn't mean to cut you right there, but
no, that's great, John.
I'm a big fan of terpenes. Big fan of terpenes.
Well, thank you, because like I want to just share with the audience like a private thing about the pediatrics. So advocates like myself and David Mapes, this wonderful gentleman that really helped a lot of parents around the country for the last 20 years with THCA. When we do the consultation, we'll bring like an indica, a sativa. Remember you said smell the roses? You can actually take like 3 or 4 different THC like buds that you're going to make in a THC extraction. You can have the children or the patient smell them, and the one that gives them the most, that you'll see that their face will light up.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 times that is the one plant that they need formulated, because it's so much about terpenes. The flavor, the smell of the THCA or CBDA is actually the flavor of the plant, and that flavor is why I believe that it's hypothalamus is involved as the master regulator of the body, because you watch how the babies, and even with myself or patients that come over that are more on the recreational side, you can have them just smell the buds. They'll know which one is going to give them the kind of effect, right? That some want a sleepy effect, some need to have more energy, and it's interesting how each patient. Some patients need like a sativa to go to sleep. It doesn't make any sense, but this job that I've been in is the most humbling job I've ever had, because nobody has all the answers, and you have to be conjunctive. You have to work on teams, and you have to respect the fact that I don't have all the strings. I don't have all the answers, and if we need more people. So like that's when I brought up the Charlotte's Web and the Jason Cranford, and that's Pimento, and then there's Pimento Harmony and Entourage. There's all these fabulous companies, but none of us have the solution for everyone. And it's kind of a unique situation where we have to really be conjunctive. You can't throw pharmaceuticals under the bus. You can't throw Reiki under the bus. You can't throw yoga, or any of these things that my mind has been blown as to the stuff that I don't understand, but it'll help my patient do better with their cannabis therapy, and it's.
You made that great point, because I know Dave, and hadn't heard from him in a while, and he's out here in California. Is he still in the industry?
He's had some health problems, and he's taken a couple of years off.
Gotcha. I'm glad that you are literally on the opposite coast, and you know of Dave. But I like the story about talking. It makes sense. You both letting the child or patient smell that. Your dad, I mean, I love teas, and you mentioned your dad earlier about teas. I mean, there's times I'm going to go with this one tonight. And it makes sense why people wear cologne, why women wear perfume, why you have essential oils, because you like, let me go with that. So it totally makes sense. And so, that's, you mentioned about, it's not a solo thing coming in this industry. It's a very humbling industry, and there's some great people, some very knowledgeable people, I don't know all the answers, and my wife did not see the success of the plant, because cancer's pancreatic cancer is a different breed. She had 3 blood tests, they all came back negative. I'm like, I know my wife, she knows her body, so the only way we found it was with an ultrasound. And actually I can't believe it was 3 years, 2 days ago that we did the ultrasound, got the results for the ultrasound. I just can't believe my life has been in a twilight zone in the last 3 years of life. And so we continue on helping people. People ask, how are you still in this industry helping? Because I've seen it work, and I've seen it work. And so that's why continuing, like you said, it's very, very humbling to continue this work and meet like-minded people. And that's why, I decided to do this show here at United Patients Group to put people together, to get this information out and be that trusted source. And that's what people have come to us for the last 10 years of help. Which way do we go? Who do we talk to? Talk to Andrew. He's worked with this ailment with children or adults. Can you talk about the DNA tests that are out there right now? What are your thoughts of that?
I'm not very well up to date on like a endocannabinoid gene, a gene panel, but if that's particularly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you're talking about DNA earlier, and I wasn't going to ask the question. I'm like, maybe I should ask Andrew what his thoughts are. You talked about the ketogenic diet and different cannabinoids as well, and so I know you're a scientist. And I didn't know if that was something in your repertoire as well. If not, we can buzz right by it if you want.
Well, let me explain what I do understand. So I was one of the first students to be on the Human Genome Project with the crappy little gel slabs, back in 1990. And what we have now that I do agree with, and I think most of the doctors and nurses know about the gene. You can get it, send in your blood, and you can get it. It's an expensive test, and it takes an extremely expensive piece of equipment and a lot of data to calculate, to look at all the base pairs in inside of the person, right? And you get a long list of gene deletions for, we all have them. There's just different dysfunctions in our DNA, and that can be very important. It's not necessarily a smoking gun, but it can like raise up some problems where, especially like in epilepsy and autism, you'll see that they don't have the genes to metabolize sugar. And their energy, the genes associated with energy production, aren't there. And then you get an explanation about why someone like me is so toxically allergic to sugar. And but in terms of, I think at some point down the road, I don't know, 2 to 5 years or something, maybe we'll have a endocannabinoid gene that had some there's about 770 genes associated with autism and epilepsy. So there's going to be a lot, and then there needs to be a long debate. And of course, these are molecules, so we'll need we'll need a lot of scientists to debate them, to retest them, to look at the consequences, because right now you can get a gene panel. Like I said, there's 770 genes indicated that are associated with epilepsy. And of course, the viewers probably know with like breast cancer, there's the ID1, breast cancer gene, and there's a lot that we know, but it's not a smoking gun, because it's still kind of up for debate, because if you have a breast cancer ID1 gene, that doesn't mean you're going to get cancer. That has to be expressed. And so there's still some things to work out. So I really think it's interesting. I've seen I've seen patients that just change their B vitamins, or once the doctor knows about the gene deletions that they explain to people, then they can change the supplement, and then their health outcome and the cannabis therapy is increased. And see, this is when we need the allopathic, we need the pharmaceutical doctor to write the prescription and to communicate with us. Then we go back to the holistic doctor, for the herbs, and then they come to me. And when everybody's just loving on each other and respecting their tradition, then the patient wins out.
Corinne and I I am today, big fan of naturopathic medicine. That's been our doctor forever. And I always share with patients that call, they say, I have anxiety and sleep issues, and I'm stressed. And a lot of times, I route them away from cannabis. I just say, it's not a one size fits all, but have you looked at trying to work with your sleep? Because a lot of times when you have lack of sleep, your stress comes out of whack, your depression, anxiety. And so you tailor this. But a lot of times too, with women that call, I say, I don't want to get personal, but how old are you? And they'll share the age. And I said, if naturopathic medicine is available in your state, go get a blood test to see where you are. Because an MD will give you a blood test here from A to Z, and a naturopath will give you the blood test A through double Z. And you can really see where you are for your own personal body. Are your hormones off? Are they out of balance? And go almost like a compound pharmacist in a natural way to balance that out, bringing the body back again, another type of bringing the body back to homeostasis, balance. And you can do that with 1, balancing your endocannabinoid system, 2, exercise, diet, sleep. You saying high in sugar, and sugar, you're very, very sensitive to sugar. So with your diet, are you vegan? Are you, what kind of diet or do you follow?
Primarily, I don't eat sugar. I don't eat MSG or processed foods. Yeah. I stay away from white carbs, just and cheap corn.
Yeah.
I always drink whole fat milk. I have a lot of fat and protein in my diet, and vegetables. I'm an omnivore. I love vegans or vegetarians or pescatarians or anyone else that has a diet discipline, I get along with, because I've had this diet where I can't eat any processed foods. I can't eat any sugar. I can't have soda pop. I can't drink really any of the sports, any of the drinks that are on the market.
Yeah.
So
You're probably doing your body a good. I went the reason I went vegan in January 2020, and I've always been in I don't say shape, but I've always been health has always been in my life, and this is the first time that I could feel that I have zero inflammation on the inside, and I don't have any, and I have zero sweet cravings. And I used to love chocolate covered pretzels at night, or chocolate, or I mean, that kind of stuff. It was just part of me going to bed, and I don't have any sweet cravings. And a friend of mine, he said, watch, get on this routine in the first, in 3 months, you're going to have zero sweet cravings. And so we'll go out, and I used to live in Belgium. I mean, I used to drink coffee, and chocolate was part of my daily balanced diet. So I didn't know, but so yeah, we would get along when it comes out, because when you get on that diet routine, it really doesn't affect. I mean, I've gone to barbecues and I've cooked my thing, and people don't give me a hard time. I think it's more accepted, just like cannabis is more accepted nowadays as well. There's a great documentary out there called The Second Brain. Of course, the brain, and then the gut is the second brain. So if anybody can take a look at that, it's pretty interesting on how when you're off down here, everything else is off. And I'm certain that you're the same way when you include sugar into your diet, inflammation, pain, joints, and gut too. So I promised you an hour, Andrew, and we're right on that mark here as well. And so, is there anything you want to share with our audience? One, I want everyone to know how to find you, but is there anything that you can share that you're working on, that you've seen out there that some of our listeners would it would be helpful tips for them if they're going through something with their child or themselves or their loved ones?
Well, I have a website, and I definitely will take referrals if people need a specialist, to speak with. I think in wrapping it up, I did want to just briefly touch on the spirituality.
Yeah, please. Sorry, I was going to go there, and we passed.
I think perhaps that would be a good, just to tell the audience. I think the things we have the most success for is like the irritable bowel and the brain, gut connection that you were just talking about, how that affects epilepsy and autism, MS, Parkinson, dementia, and autism. And how cannabis can regulate that. And the good news is that the specific formula isn't as important to starting a care regime. But I have a formula that works really well. But I'm happy to just to report that with gut dysfunction, and even with like gout and ulcerative colitis and things like, they should be trying cannabis first. Get off the NSAIDs, OxyContin, and things like that. Try like a whole plant hemp formula, and the price is coming down, and it's a great starting point. But if we wrap it up, I just want to explain that like Leo Buscaglia and the biblical sources and everything in my advocacy has been about supporting the parents with a child with epilepsy. Because if the parents are not empowered and they can't trust their own decisions, then it's nearly impossible to get the child to become better if they're doubting themselves. And I want everybody to understand that, like, I've learned so much from these patients and parents and their leadership. And when they have a gut feeling, they have no medical background. They don't even understand the formulation process. But they'll watch their kid and they'll report back to me. And oftentimes they know more about what pharmaceutical to drop, because they're looking at their kid. They know their kid. I don't. I know cannabis. They know their kid. So, like, sometimes my biggest job has been just to get them to be empowered. and their belief system, they can do this. They become, many patients become emotionally and spiritually hampered. And the first thing with cannabis that we have to do is we have to inspire hope. And when that's why my farm's called Hope Springs Memorial Farm. Because if you don't have any hope, if the patient doesn't feel that they're an active participant and if they're not driving their care and they're depending on me or they're depending on their doctor to give them the answers all the time, it doesn't work as well, because we're not, well, even if great doctors like Dustin Sulak and John Gitanis, the best ones, we don't really have a crystal ball. That we have a great heart, we'll make suggestions, but if they're not empowered and they can't communicate back these really important things, that developments, it's really hard to operate in a phone booth. You know what I mean? But your patients on the outside, and you can't get them to tell you, what is it like in your life? Like for a cancer patient, for them to say, what is it that you really need? Well, let's not talk about shrinking tumors. What is your life like? Are you empowered? Are you looking at night? Are you meditating and seeing a tunnel? And do you know that you can beat this thing? That's where the faith comes in. And the patients that come to me that have a faith, whether it's Christian or Jewish, or if they're Muslim or Hindu, if they just have that faith that God loves them, that Jesus is there for them, and there's hope. It's not about the dogmatic part about what religion is right, or was Buddha really a god? It's just that the basic faith component. And specifically in this interview, I'm trying to relate that faith experience to the faith that you can beat this illness. You can make your life better. You might not be Lance Armstrong and win a Tour de France. You may eventually pass away from cancer, but let's get it from 2 years to 10 years. Let's get you back on the golf course. Let's get you healthy enough so you can go to your daughter's wedding, or you see the kids born again. A new child being born, and that aspect. It goes back to that humility about being a caregiver, because I don't have all the answers, but the patients that come through and I can effectively instill hope, and if they come in my door with some faith, just a mustard seed of faith, and I can inspire them to fight. It's the fight that's inside of them. Now, my cannabis therapy is on a totally different level, and it's because of them, not because of me. And I supposedly have this expert guidance, but without the fight that's inside of them, I can talk and I can recommend and I can try different things over and over again. But I'm basically like a coach in a boxing ring behind them, putting water on, every time that there's a new round. And my cannabis is basically just taking that wet rag after a round of fight, putting it over and just talking in their ear and saying, okay, you got this. Okay, you ready for the next one? And then they go back out into the ring, and then it's really them and their disease, and to figure it out, and then to come back into the corner and tell us how things are going.
That's great, because I always share the same thing. I don't want to give anybody false hope, but hope is very, very powerful. Actually, there's a book that I have here called Louise Hay, Heal Your Body. And that was, it's a quick read, but it was something that really helped Corinne and I when we were going through this. And someone gave that to us as a gift, and I read it to Corinne 3 or 4 times a day. But hope is important. A hug, human contact is important. I work with some doctors, and when patients leave their office, they're still a bit shell-shocked, and he says, "You need a hug." I said, "God, do I need a hug?" And they walk out of there 10 feet tall, like they're King Kong. And so, one of our original talks that you and I had about a month ago, we're involved with this integrative oncology world and conference and organization for the past 9 years. And the very first conference that Corinne and I went to, and these are 300 integrative oncologists. They do everything besides chemo radiation. And we sat there, it was the first night, and we sat there around listening to their round table and talking. And someone said, what do you look at in the patient when they first come in? And they said, well, we look at one, we talk to them, see, you know, how they are, but also two, what's their home life like? You know, do they have a relationship with, are they married, a relationship with their spouse? Is it good? Do they have children, et cetera? We ask them, do they have what their spirituality is? And to hear an MD say that, we were like, that's pretty impressive. And then they asked, you know, do you have the hope to live? Do you want to live? And then we treat the cancer or whatever going. And I just thought, like you said, going in there, and it's almost like smelling, okay, I know what medicine we're going to use here. And same thing with the boxer putting you the towel, or you can do this. I'm behind you. And then knowing that they're with you, you know, and maybe that's why Corinne and I had 4 beautiful, beautiful months together, because I've worked with a handful of other patients where their loved one was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and they passed 48 hours later. Or a gentleman, Jim Bartell, that I'm working with right now with Ryan's Law, and his son was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he had 7 weeks, and he was like Corinne, didn't, you know, he was an athlete, et cetera. That's an interesting story for anybody there. His podcast is on, but he's out here in California, and he was in the hospital. The hospital would not allow them to use medical cannabis, California. So he was drugged out on morphine and fentanyl for the first 4 weeks out of 7 weeks. And they finally found another hospital in Sacramento that allowed him to go in and use medical cannabis. And he came out of his drugged out stupor and was able to have a relationship with his child and his wife and his friends. He passed in 7 weeks, and the father, Jim, was upset that he lost 4 weeks out of the 7 weeks that his son was alive because they wouldn't allow him to use cannabis, and they were just constantly pumping him with fentanyl and morphine. But he was talking about passing a law that all terminal patients have access to this. And you know, so that took his hope away with the medical system, you know, but he has seen hope that this plant, what it did for the last 3 weeks of his child's life, his son's life too. So anybody going through anything like that, you know, don't give up on hope when you've been diagnosed with something as serious as cancer or autism or epilepsy or any ailment that is what's happening with your life too. So I can't thank you enough, Andrew, you know, for being on the show. Andrew McIntyre, like I said, I've heard your name for years, and this is the first that you and I have seen each other face to face. So thanks for coming on. And before we go, can you share how people can get a hold of you? I'll put this also in the video with your links, but can you share again how people can get a hold of you?
I have a really simple website. It's hopesmf.com. It's Hope Springs Memorial Farm. You can shoot me an email there, especially if you're in the New England area. And, you know, if I always like to do, you know, face-to-face consults or like a Zoom consult or something like that. But
can you say that years of earbuds and Walkmans in my ear, I missed your S in this. So if you can spell it out for people too, that would be helpful.
It's Hope, S is in Sam, M is in Mary, F is in farm. Like, so .com. It's Hope Springs Memorial Farm.
Cool.
And the Springs Memorial Farm is SMF.
Cool. I appreciate that. And
so it's hopesmf.com. You can shoot me an email from there, and I hope I can help people if there's some good talking points that we covered.
Gotcha. So, Andrew, thanks again. And if you're interested in some of his paintings, you can get them there as well. He has a pretty impressive collection. So, Andrew, have a blessed evening. Thanks for being on. Everyone, this is John Malanka with the United Patients Group. Be informed and be well, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.